Trump and the other defendants have committed persistent and repeated fraud. Last week, we proved that in our motion for summary judgment. Today, we will prove our other claims. My message is simple. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law. And it is my responsibility and my duty and my job to enforce it. The law is both powerful and fragile. And today in court, we will prove our case. I thank you all for being here. And again, justice will prevail. Thank you.
I know Donald Trump is hoping justice does not prevail because yesterday was the opening day of the New York civil case against Donald Trump. It is a civil case for fraud against him personally as well as his businesses. Now, he didn't have to be there, but he did show up and he did what he does best, complain on Fox News.
This is a continuation of the single greatest witch hunt of all time. We have a rogue judge who rules that properties are worth a tiny fraction, 1/100th, a tiny fraction of what they actually are. We have a racist attorney general who's a horror show who ran on the basis that she was going to get Trump before she even knew anything about me.
If there's one thing Donald Trump's going to do, it's talk smack against the prosecutors. Also, the judges. One of the interesting things that he said in that little rant he gave to Fox News was he said that it was a not fair trial because there was no jury, which is really ironic because it was Trump's attorneys who asked for this to be a bench trial, meaning the judge decides it's on their own and there is no jury. So he complained about something that was his own decision and his team's decision as far as this case goes. But speaking of this case, cameras aren't allowed inside the courtroom, but here's an overview of what happened and what's expected to happen from the New York Times. The trial stems from a lawsuit brought last year by New York's Attorney General Letitia James, accusing Mr. Trump and other defendants, including 2 of his adult sons and his companies, fraudulently inflating the value of their assets to obtain favorable loans and insurance deals. The judge in the trial, Arthur F. Engoron, has already found that Mr. Trump and the other defendants were liable for fraud and that the annual financial statements on which they listed their assets were filled with examples of such misconduct. Trial will determine whether Mr. Trump will pay a significant penalty as well as any other punishments. Ms. James has asked that he pay $250 million and that he and his sons be permanently barred from running a business in New York, which is one of the reasons that we're seeing Trump be so defensive about this trial specifically, is because what it does is it seeks to rip apart the mythology that Donald Trump has created around himself and around the name Trump, that it is synonymous with good business, that it is synonymous with wealth, when in reality, it seems to be synonymous with fraud. Now, Kevin Wallace, who's a lawyer for the Attorney General's office, delivered an opening statement in this case. Mr. Kevin Wallace told the courtroom that employees of Mr. Trump had arbitrarily assigned value to individual assets, properties like Trump Tower and 40 Wall Street, to arrive at the former president's desired net worth. He played a clip of Michael D. Cohen, Mr. Trump's former fixer, explaining the process, prompting the former president to cross his arms and shake his head, scowling. Again, Donald Trump didn't have to be there, but chose to be there. Now, his defense was essentially, and not just his defense in the news, but his defense in court, was to allege that this is just, one of his favorite terms, a witch hunt. That kicked off a sequence in which Justice Engoron went back and forth with Ms. Haba, who's one of Trump's attorneys, and the other defense lawyers, correcting what he said were legal errors from their presentations, which is not something that you want if you're the defendant in a trial that is a bench trial. Now, one thing that we should highlight is that Trump keeps admitting that he lowers the values of his properties. He's just too dumb to realize this. And he started with this post on Truth Social. Let's take a look at this. It says Judge Engoron's valuation of Mar-a-Lago, the most spectacular property in Palm Beach, Florida, is fraudulent. Again, I gotta stop. This is the judge who gets to decide this case. by Trump's own team's wishes. The judge decides liability in this case, not a jury, the judge. So taking to social media to attack the very person who has that power is so counterintuitive that only Donald Trump could do something like this. But let's go back to the post. He says he states a value of $18 million, knowing full well that it's worth perhaps 50 to 100 times that amount. And Cohen is working diligently to misrepresent me and my net worth, which is substantially more than is shown on my fully disclaimed financial statements. I have not even included my most valuable asset, brand. He should resign from the quote bench and be sanctioned by the courts for his abuse of power and his intentional and criminal interference with the presidential election of 2024, of which I am leading all candidates, both Republican and Democrat, by significant margins. Likewise, Ms. James should resign for purposeful and criminal election interference. She is fully aware that Mar-a-Lago and other assets are worth much more than what she is claiming. Both of these Democrat operatives are a disgrace to New York and to the United States of America. Again, very smart move to attack the judge that holds your business reputation in the palm of his hand. But he also reiterated this yesterday.
Just so you know, my financial statements are phenomenal. They are actually less in terms of the numbers used than the actual net worth. The actual net worth is substantially more. No bank was affected, no bank was hurt. They don't even know why they have to be involved. And they've so testified. They can't believe that they're involved because they were paid back on time. There were no defaults, there were no problems. And it was like a perfect client.
Everything was perfect. Everything was good. It was big and it was perfect. And I think, Senator Turner, that we're seeing, like I said earlier, this defensiveness is so rooted in the fact that this is someone whose entire personality and he put it in all caps, his brand has been built around being a savvy businessman, and the curtain has been pulled back. The emperor has no clothes, which is something so many people knew for a long time, but having it proven in a court of law, I think just really hurts his ego.
Definitely, that's what this is all about. You know, when he talks about perfect, that's his anthem. The Trump anthem is everything about me, everything around me is perfect. And if you don't believe me, if you don't believe it, just ask me and I'll tell you it's perfect. He had to be there. Rayyvana, you laid out an important point. One, it is for him to protect the image that he is this ultra wealthy person. Two, it is his home turf. And three, he needs to put on a political show. That is why he showed up, because having him show up and hold press conferences around this trial animates his base like no other. He can continue to paint himself as the victim and to show them live and in living color how unfair the system actually is. He comments on the judge, but I noted that he called the Attorney General, Letitia James, a racist. I want to let Mr. Trump know, impossible. She is not a racist. People think they can banty that word about and make it so. Racism is about systemic racism. It's about a power dynamic. It's not an individual black person being attorney general. It is the power dynamic rooted in this country of white supremacy that black people have not had the opportunity to wield that kind of global power. And people need to understand that just because he is calling her racist does not make it so. And he's not the only one, Rayyvana, that says this whole notion of reverse racism. All we gotta do is ask the sanctimonious and he'll tell you it is a misnomer. It is not true. Racism is pervasive and it is systemic. It is not about one individual act. It is about multitudes of acts over time, over generations. And so it's not even funny, but it's quite disappointing because the people who follow President Donald J. Trump will believe that this is in fact racism. I wonder what he would have said if the Attorney General had been white. What would he have labeled it then?
Right. And it's so insidious because we do see racism to such a large extent in our justice system, even in civil cases in our justice system, but particularly in criminal trials. So to sit there and pretend that it's racist against white people when in reality, white people are significantly less likely to be charged with a crime, even than their black counterparts. Committing the same crime, they're more likely to get lesser sentences. We see crimes that of poverty are further criminalized. The sentences are higher versus Donald Trump, who is a career criminal, a man who has made all of his money and all of his fame and all of his glory by committing crimes, is someone who is allowed to rise to be the president of the mother effing United States, but somehow he's a victim of anti-white racism. Give me a break.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.